Let me start by sharing with you an experience I had. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. Now, I'm president of Eurosif, but I'm also director of the Dutch SIF. And the Dutch SIF is Sustainable Investment Forum. You've just heard that the US Social Investment Forum was one of the entities that backed the Dodd-Frank Act. But in Holland we do something else besides being a coalition of SIFs, let's say, financial and NGOs that are really going for social investment. We also do engagement directly with companies. And of course in Holland we have this large extractive company called Shell. So I went to the Shell shareholder meeting and I got some questions from tax justice, and one moment in time, you should imagine this kind of shareholder meetings. They are done in a place in Holland that's called the Circus Theatre, and indeed it is a kind of circus. There are hundreds of people coming. It's in the same time done in the UK, and you have people that are just putting color on stage, citing poems, singing songs, and a lot of activists, of course, involved there. And every time, 80% of all the questions are not about any financial matter, are just about sustainability. So, of course, at one moment in time, the Shell management, who's always managed to stay very cool, they said, well, don't you understand that we pay a lot of tax to all these governments in all those countries that you worry about? We help them actually to get any further. So then I went up to the mic with my question. I said, okay, that is great if you pay all this money to get those governments going and help those economies to develop. But can you explain me then why you have 26 legal entities on the Bahamas, and as far as I know, there's no oil to be found over there? And then they were completely silent. And he looked at me in amazement and he said, yes, but this is just, we just have a normal tax policy system, which is we abiding all laws in all the world, obviously. And then it became clear, even in meetings afterwards, that they had no clue where this question was coming from. Because tax avoidance, we in this room, it has been mentioned as something which is kind of, a low-life thing you should never do. It's awful, it's ugly. Most shareholders would not agree at all. They would say any tax you can avoid legally is great for benefits. It's great for our profit. The company will flourish. Long-term results will be better. So there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, most of the people would do the same thing in their private lives, wouldn't we? Who wants to pay tax? So I think we should agree that this is just a very ugly animal we are fighting here. It's a complete culture. You get our money and nobody likes to pay tax, let's be honest. Eurosif is a SIF of SIFs. A SIF is a Sustainable Investment Forum. It's always a multi-stakeholder coalition. So it's called a coalition of NGOs, of the financial sector, and of consultants, for instance, service providers, etc. Now, the activities you see, one of the main activities, of course, is also to work with the European Commission, giving input to some of the processes that are being prepared, some of the legislation that's being prepared. But we also do separate research. I'll show you some of it in a second on, let's say, the growth of the sustainable investment market. These are our members. Among them, you will find, for instance, Calvert, that has been mentioned. But my main slide I want to talk to you is this one. Actually, if you think about why was this, let's say, the financial crisis that caused the economic crisis, of course. What were the main reasons? Well, there have been many people that have been writing about this, and most of them are a lot wiser than I am. So I would like to share anyway my thoughts about this. I think the main thing is short-termism. And unfortunately, like with the tax avoidance, this is in the heart of all companies. Most companies are being rewarded, most management is being rewarded for a total shareholder return. And basically it just looks to the core of that is your share price. And the share price is something which is very volatile, as we all know. But that's where they're being paid for. And this kind of thinking gets people very creative. Now, I've been working in companies for 18 years of my life. And those were all very decent companies. But I know that, let's say, 2 or 3 months before year end, management would come to me and would say, to the highest level, and say, well, how creative can we be in boosting the financial results a little bit? Because our bonus depends on that, and the bonuses are very important in American companies, certainly. And this drives the way of thinking, which is very short-term oriented, very result-oriented. And again, we could consider this as kind of dirty talk. But in most shareholder meetings, and we visit 60 shareholder meetings every year, this is all what's all about. This short-termism will drive your profit, will drive your dividends, will drive the result of any shareholder. Now, unless you have good corporate governance, including all stakeholders, that will create a kind of check and balance, but in most companies that's not the case. And then there's regulation which is, let's say, doesn't ask for long-term results. Even like in Norway, we have the state pension fund, which is a huge entity which has influence in their thinking and our policies all around the world. In Holland, we have a kind of similar situation with huge state pension funds. If you look to the result of those funds, how they are being measured by the government, they're being measured by looking to the interest rate of that moment. So the moment, like in the past couple of years, interest is like 0%. Let's say the value of their how do you call it? The money they have is looking very low. This is short-term measurement because there's not any pension fund which will have to pay out today all what they have. They will pay out in 20 years, 40 years. So why would you measure the value by the interest rate of the moment? So this is something the state requires. So even in their thinking, it's short term. And indeed in Holland we got a turmoil. It's amazing. We have like 2-3 years. All pension funds had to report again, had to take measures, had to reduce the money they had to pay out. But in fact that's crazy because there is nothing wrong. The interest rate will go up again, and you have to measure it on a longer period of time. Then the compensation or incentive systems. We did a survey some years ago. So how much of this bonus is that we always talk about, and people always cry out loud, this is so high, it's amazing. Okay, they are too high, but I think it's far more important and more interesting to see why would you pay a bonus to somebody? Why? On what grounds? Now you can link them on financial behavior, but you can also link them to non-financial behavior. And the moment you do that, of course, 3 things will happen. If the management, even if there's only 2, 4, 10 people on a board, we talk only about those 10 people perhaps. But what they will do is, first of all, if there is non-financial goals, they'll make sure that first these goals are going to be quantifiable, because now there's money attached, you have to be very smart. Secondly, they will roll them out through all the organization, because those 10 people will not get the goals done, will not get the work done. You need all of the organization. So suddenly, let's say sustainability is part of the organization. And thirdly, they'll assure there's a sound reporting system, which is not the case at this moment in time. So indeed, if you make it measurable, things can happen. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And then there's this lack of transparency, which is, let's say, the forebode of all which is sustainable. First, you need to be transparent. At the Eurosif, we have been developing, for instance, the transparency guidelines for SRI funds, social responsible investment funds. And there is a relation between transparency and sustainable behavior. If you are transparent, there's a good chance you will be sustainable. Sustainability without transparency is impossible. So what can we do? Well, I think we'll have to go to a long-term focus. Sustainability means long-term. The word means long-term. We have to look at all aspects. You have to invest in the real world. Let me say a couple of words about that, because that has to do with the initiative we're talking about. And it has been mentioned before, I think, also by the Secretary of State. Of course, the problems we have seen that caused the crisis have to do with people inventing all kinds of financial products, and nobody knew at a certain moment what was the value of that. In fact, if you look to all the money in the world, only 10% is based on the real economy. The rest is just making profit, selling and reselling and reselling. It's virtual money. It's not there. Look at what happened to LinkedIn the other day. I mean, I can't find of a better example, but only 10% of what we have in our wallets is based on something which is there in reality. And if you want to avoid bubbles, you have to get back to real economy. Now, part of that is that any shareholder would start to behave like an owner. When I was at school, at high school, I studied economy, then it was there. As a shareholder, it means you have a share of the company. That means you own a part of the company. It means you are responsible for a part of that company. Now everybody would say now, I'm not responsible because people are afraid for legal issues. But in fact you should behave as a good father or mother would to a company. Stick to them. Be loyal to a company and then they will accept you. We as a Dutch chef go to companies every year to talk to them. We have 3 shares in our wallet. But they'll listen to us. They'll talk to us and they'll accept some of the things we are saying. Because they know why. Was to the company the other day is asked them, why did you change now after we've been knocking on your door for 10 years and nothing moved there? Why? And the answer was, because you kept on knocking to our doors 10 years. Now we can do it with 2-3 lousy shares. Any investor with a lot more serious packages, what can they do? Now when I got to the Dutch state and said, hey, you're owner of the ABN AMRO, which is one of the largest banks of Holland, or used to be at least, or still is one of the largest. What do you tell them about sustainability? What do you tell them about transparency, about reporting? They say, we cannot say anything because we are the government. No, you're not the government, you're the owner. Behave like one. So what we, of course, recommend is a country-by-country reporting. We do recommend more openness, more transparency of companies, but we add a 4th issue here. Transparency of investors about their policies. Now, to wrap up, it's a complicated system. We already talked about internationalization. Shell, I spoke to them last week, we had a shareholder meeting, and they, of course, are now very much aware of tax issues, but they say, well, we have a problem, because we have to abide the Dodd-Frank Act. We are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, but some countries do not allow us to report, so how can we do that? So they need, from their side, internationalization. And of course, until it's not there, they will use it not to report. And then, I think, when I visited the EYTI Congress 2 months ago in Paris, then I saw those presidents and CEOs, etc. And funny enough, although the major extractive industries were lobbying against Dodd-Frank, obviously, 1504. But everybody at that Congress seems to be so positive. Because all the presidents would say, well, isn't it great? Now we have to report just finally report what we should get, and here there's a lot of money missing, so now we know where it is. But he also said, we now know, because we are put under pressure, of course, by the extractive industries, so now we can compare things between countries, so we know where we've been cheated or not. So we're in a better position to have a discussion on the money they owe us. And then there came the CEOs, and they said, well, isn't this great? Because we always had to pay all this money for, well, they didn't mention it, of course, let's say for we would call it corruption, but there's a better word for that, obviously. And there's no more money disappearing, so isn't it great? Now, I do not think everybody is as happy. Some people will be more happy than others, probably. But if this is the outcome of such an initiative, we might very well see, perhaps, a better world in a couple of years when Dodd-Frank is being, let's say, echoed. And I certainly hope that the call for the European Parliament, because I think there Europe could take the lead, and Europe should not always walk behind the US. So we have a strong culture of, let's say, multi-stakeholder, a strong culture of finding a balance which is not only free market and commercial oriented. So let's use that culture, and if Parliament asks for it, I would say, for your democracy, implement something like that. But if so that's being done, and you get a kind of international agreement how you should move forward, then I think at the end of the day I hope to see those CEOs and presidents and in Europe probably some prime ministers to be very positive and applaud this effect. So let's work together, hold hands, and move the world a bit forward. Thank you very much.